Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 3 of the Q&A, so let's go ahead and knock this out. Alright, first question. I'm in college, and everyone who has a decent bench press in my gym, D2 athletes and recreational lifters, peaks up to one working set, and pretty much all of them on programs, or not seem to be able to make decent progress with this method. I do 3x5 on bench 3 times a week. Do you think I could gain strength faster off of one peak set on bench press? Thank you, Jason. Here's what I would say on that. It's going to depend on how advanced you are. If they're D2 athletes and stuff up there and they have these good benches, look, building to one peak set instead of sets across, I think can work just fine on big movements once you have built a solid foundation. I don't recommend people do it who are still pretty weak. Like, here's what I would say. If you can at least meet my novice standard of strength, I don't recommend doing the peak set thing. So I'm talking about benching 2 plates aside for 5, squatting 3 plates aside for 5. You know, that needs to be your baseline minimum strength. I think if you're at that point, though, and you want to start using systems that ramp to a peak set, it's perfectly acceptable. It works just fine. But for the novice lifter, not so much. So that's what you need to remember. All of these people, yeah, they have really good bench presses, but they've also built a base first, and I think that's important to remember here. And you need to remember when they build to one peak set, they usually are still ramping up to that. The other sets are still creating a training stimulus. All right, next question. Jason, in response to your video you just made about cutting/bulking, I've been slowly losing weight for a few months while adding strength on your novice program. Lately, my progress has been stalling. I'm 6'2", 240 pounds even. I've been at 240 grams of protein and about 2,600 calories. B plus diet adherence. I'm thinking of trying to adding around 250 calories of protein and carbs to see if it helps with my progress. Am I on the right track? I still like to lose a pound a week while gaining strength. I'm probably somewhere around 30% BMI. I think you mean 30% body fat, probably. If you're at 30% body fat, you can still, yeah, you should be able to continue to gain some strength while you lose weight. But yeah, you need to start losing slower. If you're at that point now where your strength gains are stalling, you may be cutting too fast. You could definitely try adding a little bit of extra calories in. You're still maintaining a caloric deficit, but you will have a possibility of some recomposition that way. You know, if you're a few months in, you know, a lot of it's going to depend on how far you are, and that's what you need to remember too. The more advanced you are, the harder it's going to be to recomp like this in any way. But also the leaner you are. But if you're still around 30% body fat and you're inside of your first year of serious training, I think you can still pull off some additional recomp, which means, you know, that pound a week being lost while slowly increasing, you're still going to stall some. It's going to be slow from here, but it could be doable. So it can be within your reach. So I would say give it a try. Give it a try. Monitor the scale closely and kind of watch what's going on. Pay attention to your recovery and everything. And yeah, give it a try. Bump the calories up just a hair and assess it from there. I don't think that's a bad strategy for where you're at, because you probably have gained some muscle and everything on top of it. But yeah, you're just probably not getting enough calories to continue to facilitate that while you're losing weight as quickly as you are. So yeah, give it a go. All right, next question. Hey Jason, you say that the overhead pressing works a different head of the triceps more than benching, the long head, but does working a chin up work a different head of the biceps more than a row? Good question. I would say to some extent the possibility is there due to that stretch at the bottom, because it does put the shoulder in a different position. I don't think what you're going to see is going to be as pronounced as what we see on some exercises working the long head more on the tricep with the bicep, because the bicep isn't as complex in its function. Yes, there is a shoulder rotation aspect of it, but you're actually including that in the row. That's included in the row, just not to the same degree that it is on, say, a weighted chin up or a weighted pull up, particularly when we start talking about going really deep. When you start going really deep on the chin up and pull up, though, it's interesting is that same head of the tricep that we're talking about, the long head, does get worked more. All right, so for someone who's doing a lot of benching and they do have maybe a long head that's lagging, who's not overhead pressing, really putting a heavy focus on the chin-ups, and particularly pull-ups, will actually work that head more. But as far as overall bicep development goes, yeah, I think because of the additional stretch that we can get from a dead hang pull-up or a dead hang chin-up, there could be something to that. And also what we need to remember, yeah, we could even argue with the chin-up versus the pull-up. They're being worked differently as well, aren't they? Because the chin-up seems like, again, that puts it into a more favorable contracted position, the bicep, but it doesn't give the same stretch on the bicep that the pronated grip does it? Now, is it necessarily going to be different heads being worked? Maybe not to that large of a degree, but it could be different muscle fibers do have some activation that's going to work on one slightly more than the other, and the same thing when we get over to rowing. But I would still say overall, when we're talking about bicep development, pull-ups and chin-ups just move it through a greater range of motion with more stretch and everything else than a row does. So they're going to be superior for bicep development if you are looking at a big compound movement to contribute to your biceps. I think pull-ups and chin-ups are still going to do better than rows. It's not to say rows don't contribute to biceps, they do, but I think just overall development, you're going to be better with that instead of the rows. So that's another way to look at it too. Not necessarily about individual heads, but overall muscle fiber recruitment and activation. All right, next question. What do you think, is upper-lower split better than bro split for muscle growth? I am more intermediate than novice lifter. I've been training for 1.5 years with a bro split. Well, what I am going to say, man, the fact that you're using Jason Genova's name suggests to me that you may be a weird troll, and you might need to reassess your life a little bit at this point. Just throwing that out there. But that aside, let's go ahead and take your possible troll question, and let's take it like a real question. Without a doubt, an upper-lower split 4 days a week has more potential, in my opinion, for muscle growth for anyone who's not blasting significant amounts of anabolics. Now, some people say, well, you're getting overlap of bro split, you know, all these different muscles in the upper body get worked. Your chest day and back day and arm day and shoulder day have a very big overlap. Yeah, so you can argue there's overlap because you have 4 upper body days, and there's a lot of overlap between those different things because your arms and shoulders and everything and get worked on all of them, and your shoulder day works your chest and blah, blah, blah. You can say that bullshit all you want, but your legs are only getting trained 1 day a week. So it does not have the same potential for muscle mass when over 50% of the muscles in your body are being trained twice a week versus 1 day a week, especially when we know about muscle protein synthesis. So yes, very, very clearly, there's more potential for overall muscle mass on this, even if upper body muscle mass might actually be somewhat similar, because your upper body is only half of your body. We're not going to get into that Genova meme with him saying that either, about the upper and lower body. All right. Next question and last question of the week. Hey Jason, on a recent video you mentioned that you should be doing rows from the ground instead of doing the bodybuilder version of bent over rows. But you also have a video tutorial from a long time ago on the bodybuilder barbell bent over row. I'm currently running the cutting version of your novice 5x5. Which version of the barbell row should people do on your novice program? Thanks in advance. I've covered this many years ago. Let me make this clear. Yes, I have done tutorials on the normal, what they're calling a bent over row, which is what bodybuilders adopted more. But the traditional row is always off the floor. Now, here's what you should look at. If I've over time made revisions to things, and there should be some common logic, and have said you really should be rowing off the floor when you row, and you look at an older program I wrote, but I've said you should always be doing the X instead of Y, then you shouldn't need to ask if you need to do X versus Y on an older program. Go ahead and do X, because I said you should always do X versus Y. Row from the floor, brother. Row from the floor. It's better overall, and it's going to carry over better to your other lifts. You know, rowing from the floor will carry over to your deadlift. You don't do very much deadlift volume on this program. You are relying on other exercises to build your deadlift for you, because you're only pulling 1 peak set every other workout. That very large volumes of squatting and rowing, particularly rowing from the floor, will build your deadlift so that you can progress on the deadlift with the low volume that you're doing in it. So yeah, I mean, definitely rowing off the floor is going to help build your overall progress better because it will have better synergy and carry over to your other lifts. Yes, absolutely row from the floor. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.